Okay, hi everybody. Welcome. Happy Friday. Also, happy almost first day of spring. I'll say that too. Lots of good spring celebrations going on. So happy spring. Welcome to all of you thank you for being here. We're going to quickly introduce ourselves. You all will be able to chat with us in the chat box. So if you have anything you'd like to share with us, please feel free to reach out. I'll be looking at the chat box for most of the time since Jessie will be presenting on her expertise. So my name is Randy. I recognize a lot of wonderful names here on the attendee list. I'm so excited to see you all here. I'm the Director of Community Engagement here at Youth Care, and I use she, her pronouns, and I will be here to support and give updates and answer any questions about Youth Care in general. And I'm going to hand it over to Jessie.
Hi everyone, I'm Jessie Friedman. I also use she, her pronouns. I'm the Director of Public Policy at Youth Care, and I'm really excited to be here with all of you and talk about the great work that's happening.
So like Jessie said in the chat, this is going to be recorded, and also we're going to share a presentation here now. So here we go. Welcome again. I'm sure I can do this correctly. Okay, here we go. So wanted to take the time to acknowledge that I am sitting on Indigenous land, and Youth Care, all of Youth Care locations are here on Indigenous land, and we wanted to pay our respects to all who have stewarded this land for many, many generations and continue to steward the land. So wanted to pay our respects there. And we will continue to talk about Youth Care things, but wanted to keep that in the back of our minds. So welcome. Thank you. You are here because you have been involved at Youth Care before as a supporter or as a volunteer or as a friend in some way. So we're really glad to be able to reconnect with you a little bit. It's been a long 2.5 years. So at the very least, we wanted to be able to bring some conversation to community and reconnect with all of you. We're gonna do some fun interactive stuff. So this is it's called a Mentimeter. You can do this on your phone, or if you are on a desktop or a laptop, you can open another browser and you can use this code to get into our presentation. So it's www.menti.com, and the code is 5420-9793. I'm also sticking that in the chat, and throughout all of the slides, it is at the very top of the slide, so you can always check back in if you lose track of this code. So we're gonna attempt to do some interactive, fun, colorful things here and capture some of your thoughts. So you're here because you care. You've supported Youth Care in the past. So we just wanted to hear with your own words, and maybe you can see others who are here and care a lot about Youth Care too, saying similar things. We have a wonderful community here, but fill in the blank. I care about homeless youth because ... It will slowly populate your answer. So if you submit an answer and you're like, where is it? That is coming. Don't worry. I'm hoping my slide's not frozen. Here we go. Got some people. These are beautiful comments to start with. Anyone else have a comment about why they care? There we go. A lot of these resonate, I think, at least with me too, personally. I mean, this is kind of why we're all here, right? This is a slide we may use on social media too. Just full disclosure, we may also post this just as a wonderful way to highlight why you all are involved and care about the youth that we serve. Right, and I see a comment in the chat too. Young people are the future stewards of our planet. Love that. So I'm going to read some out loud here while others are still adding. I care about homeless youth because they're the future. There's a need. It creates love. Everyone should thrive. It could have been me. Fixing systemic inequity, supporting all community. Everyone deserves a home, a safe environment, family experience. So thank you for these beautiful answers. And let's keep this top of mind. This is why we're here. This is what why we do what we do. And I see another comment here that, thank you, Randy. It's nice. I'm glad you're here. She says, in 30 years of working with and supporting vulnerable youth, she's witnessed how youth care has not only changed, but saved lives. That's really lovely of you to say. Thank you, Randy. I can't wait to see you someday. Okay, here we go. So one question, I mean, of course, COVID continues to be uncertain, but we wanted to just kind of gauge, you know, how do you want to continue to be involved in the coming year? So fill out this little, you can choose as many answers as you want. Do you want to volunteer? Do you want to host a drive? Do you want to donate needed items personally? Do you want to give a financial gift? Do you want to host a fundraiser? Some folks will do like a birthday or some kind of a celebration and ask folks to donate to youth care in their honor. Attend the luncheon, attend a different event, board service, get your workplace involved, or some other idea. We're always open to ideas. But it's kind of fun to see kind of what you look forward to and what we can kind of try to focus on that would be meaningful to you all as community members. Great, so I see some folks who are eager to volunteer. That's great news. Some folks who are interested in donating needed items and giving financially. We appreciate any gift that's meaningful to you. Attending the luncheon, that's a fun one. If you have never been, we would love to see you there. Board service, also a very impactful way to volunteer, and something else. So if you have another idea, we will post our emails at the end of this presentation and you can reach out to us about brainstorming what those ideas might be. Cool, thank you. We look forward to this, all of this engagement in the next year. Okay, so some updates from youth care. I do see a question here from a participant about the CEO transition, so I can give a short update about that. I do want to make sure we get to Jesse's part of this presentation. So if there are follow-up questions after I give a few updates, let's talk. So yes, the CEO transition continues. It's been a really exciting 2022 to think about what the opportunities are with that type of transition. So our programs have actually taken some time to restructure a little bit, and we're launching some new exciting case management programming where it's going to be a lot more centralized case management. We're calling it centralized case management, where a young person will have a much more fluid experience with their case manager throughout all the youth care locations. We have about 16 physical locations at youth care. So we want youth to be able to navigate all the different locations and services internally and externally very fluidly. So we're excited about that change as well. And so that's an example of a way in which youth care is really taking advantage of the moment of change, moment of opportunity. The CEO position is posted publicly and nationally and locally, and we have received, from what I understand, some very exciting candidates. And so I believe interviews are starting shortly, and we should expect to be able to hire someone in the next few months and be able to announce a new CEO hopefully by the summer. So keep your ears open. There's a lot of potential there, and it's also posted on our website if you know of anyone who would be interested. We have not quite started using the space at the Denny substation, so there's a question in the chat about the space next downtown in South Lake Union. There's the new Denny substation. We are very humbled to be able to partner with the city to use that space for workforce development programming. I believe the renovations for that building are still in progress. So the city is renovating that building just a little bit to be able to serve the needs that youth care has for that space. So as soon as it's done, we will start to move in with workforce development programming. And it's going to be beautiful. There's been our artist, our muralist who's been in there also contributing to the space. So it'll be, maybe we'll have some kind of photo essay about when it actually launches and be able to bring you all into the space. Also wanted to say our luncheon date for this year has been finalized. We are announcing this in small ways, and then we will have more of a public announcement coming in the coming weeks. But save the date, our luncheon will be September 15th at the Westin. So we're very excited to be able to hopefully have an in-person event for the first time in 3 years. And then other things we can talk about at the end. I love the questions, so keep the questions coming, and I'm going to make sure we make time for talking about the follow-up from the legislative session, but we can certainly have a question and answer session at the end of this presentation as well, which can be questions about legislative advocacy or more about different things at youth care. So I think my next slide is Jesse's. Okay, I'm gonna mute myself and it's all yours, Jesse.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today, except my older brother, who I see on the participant list and didn't tell me he was coming. So you can save your questions for later, Josh. So Jesse Friedman, Director of Public Policy at Youth Care, here today to tell you all a little bit more about how the legislative session shook out. I think some of you all were here a few weeks ago and we gave kind of a mid-session update, but had some really exciting things to report out since then. So wanted to make sure to share with you all. So just a kind of overview of where we're going to go in this presentation, a little bit about what Youth Care's priorities were and how those ended up shaking out, kind of other state legislative achievements. All of our work is done in partnership with other organizations and other coalitions who did a lot of really incredible work this session. So just want to highlight kind of some of what happened there, and then a little roadmap of where we're headed next. So first, the priorities. So we had a few priorities. This was a short legislative session, so even years or short sessions, so 2022, which means the budget's kind of more focused and the session's more focused on sort of smaller technical fixes. It's not big sweeping policy changes, but kind of little things that need to happen before next year's long session. So our biggest request this year and kind of our focus was for our Youth Care Workforce Development Center, which is a site we're building on Capitol Hill in partnership with Community Roots Housing. It's going to be 74 units of low-income housing, some of which will be set aside for young people and then 3 floors of workforce development spaces. So classrooms and training areas, just to kind of recognize that the path out of homelessness, or one path to housing stability, is really being prepared for living wage jobs. So this is really setting up a site right across from Seattle Central College, where young people can not only receive stable housing, but also kind of the skills and trades needed to sort of stay stably housed throughout adulthood. So we requested $4.5 million from the state capital budget for construction in the upcoming year. And I'll, as the presentation goes, kind of let you know where these all shook out. Our second priority was improving support and compensation for our frontline workers. So our workers and frontline workers all over the state work 24 hours a day with really some of the most vulnerable young people that we have, and often make kind of barely over minimum wage for this really, really difficult in-person work. When so many of us transitioned to being behind our computer screens, they stayed kind of at the front lines. And because of often stagnant contracts and things like that, the wages just don't keep up, especially in King County with the cost of living. So this request was for $78 million total, 77.5 of which would have been for stipends for frontline service providers, and $500,000 for a study to kind of figure out what a more long-term fix would be, because we know that a $2,000 stipend doesn't change kind of wage equity moving forward. And it's an issue we're seeing with our staff, and kind of, you know, the great resignation is happening everywhere, and providers aren't separate from that. And the last priority that we have was expanding behavioral health access in homeless youth shelters. Youth Care is really fortunate to receive funding to have on-site therapists at our under 18 sites, which is really crucial because we know that young people who are experiencing homelessness are more likely to have behavioral health challenges. And having that kind of resource on site means the young people aren't having to navigate the housing system and the healthcare system and the behavioral health system. And they really physically are able to meet young people where they're at. So this would have added $1.2 million for the upcoming year to really expand those resources and make sure, you know, Youth Care maintains the funding and other providers statewide. So it doesn't matter where a young person shows up, they're able to access kind of behavioral health care anywhere. So where we ended up, for those of you who were here last time, we did a little bit more of an overview on the state budget process. So kind of how it works is we come up with a request, the governor passes his proposal. A couple months later, the state house passes their budget proposal, the Senate passes their budget proposal, and then everyone kind of comes to the table and comes up with the final budget that becomes state law. So between December and March, it's just kind of a constant release of budget talks and negotiations. And we are overall really happy where we ended up in the final budget. So of our $4.5 million request for the Workforce Development Center, we ended up with $4 million, which is an incredible investment. For the frontline provider stipends, we requested $78 million and ended up with 55, which is an incredible investment. And for the behavioral health care and youth shelters, we requested 1.2 and received 600. So it's not all the way there, but it's certainly more than there would have been otherwise. So we're really grateful for those final investments and that those needs were kind of centered in budget negotiations. So here we're kind of going to pivot a little bit and talk about what all our partners accomplished and kind of what the legislature did this year with regard to youth and young adult housing specifically, and kind of housing more broadly. And just a quick thank you if we have any other advocates on the call. Thank you so much for your work. I mean, the legislative session is just a constant rush, and there's so much happening, and there are so many people who kind of tapped into different areas that really all come together to make sure that there's a strong continuum of services for young people and for anyone experiencing housing instability. So some policy changes I wanted to highlight specifically with youth and young adults, and Quick shout out to our partners at the Washington Coalition of Homeless Youth Advocates, specifically the Mockingbird Society and Building Changes, for their work on these policies. HB 1905 kind of expands programming and resources for young people who are exiting state systems of care, so foster care, juvenile justice, behavioral health, to ensure that young people exiting those systems don't exit into homelessness. We know that young people experiencing homelessness are much more likely to have had experience in those systems. And this really seeks to build kind of more holistic supports to make sure that those young people who are the responsibility of the state legally have the resources they need to exit care and remain stably housed. SB 5883 kind of expands access to healthcare for unaccompanied minors. So as it had previously stood, minors who don't have parental consent for healthcare often had a really hard time receiving care. There was sort of a convoluted process where healthcare providers would have to determine whether clients met a certain set of criteria in order to receive healthcare, which, you know, everyone should have access to eye exams and primary care. And we know that causes big problems down the road if young people don't have access to the services. And this just kind of takes out a barrier for young people experiencing homelessness who often don't have a parent who can kind of sign a consent form. SB 5566 expands eligibility for the Independent Youth Housing Program for any young person aged 18 to 24 who's previously been in foster care. So previously, this was a program where young people exiting foster care, if they'd been in foster care in the past couple years, had access to this housing program. This expands it so anyone who has had any experience in foster care, which we know is a predictor of housing instability, has access to this housing program. So just expands kind of with the same vision as HB 1905 that I mentioned above, kind of just expands that vision of making sure that young people who are in our care really have the services they need. And then Youth Care's $4 million capital funding that we received for the Workforce Development Center was part of a larger $15 million investment in youth and young adult capital projects throughout the state. So there are investments in youth housing in Ellensburg and Everett and Bellingham on the east side and South King County to really make sure that, you know, wonderful that Youth Care got the funding, and also that folks did around the region and around the state. I'm gonna have a sip of water, but I'm ready for the next slide. Kind of more broad investments in housing, thanks to our partners at the Washington Low-Income Housing Alliance and many others. It's a huge pot of funding. Oops, this is a typo. That isn't all for rapid acquisition of housing units. Interesting. I don't know what I meant there. Suffice it to say, there was a huge investment in the Housing Trust Fund, which opens up competitive processes that folks can apply for capital investments in housing, and funding for rapid acquisition and construction of housing units. So that means, you know, as we've seen often in Seattle and King County, it's easier to acquire buildings and to start construction on housing. So these are just investments to make sure that where there's someone who's willing to build housing and support it, that there's funding to do so. And kind of when we get back to questions at the end, I'm going to figure out what those numbers were supposed to say and fix them. What's next besides me fixing those numbers? Conversations have already started about preparing for next session. So kind of bigger, as I mentioned, in odd years. So in 2023, it'll be a longer session, which means there's more time for sort of bigger policy changes. So there's already conversations happening about what kind of that would look like, more systems change things instead of just solely sort of budget fixes. And I will absolutely share those as we have them. And then also kind of getting into local and federal advocacy. This is now the start of the federal budget cycle. So we've got some meetings with the local delegation in DC coming up in the next few weeks. So talking to them about kind of what housing providers are seeing and young adult service providers are seeing. And then at the local level, we've recently transitioned to the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. So previously there had been kind of a number of housing and homelessness governing bodies, I guess, in King County. And now that's all congregated under the King County Regional Authority. So that's been kind of propped up now and working with partners there to really make sure that the needs of youth and young adults are being heard. So that's all I have. Do we have any questions? I see the comment that improving compensation is essential and beginning to happen, and I absolutely agree. It's the right thing to do, and it's essential. I mean, without staff, there are no services. It's really the backbone of our homelessness response. How much money did you get? We got $4 million for the capital project on Capitol Hill. The workforce stipend program, so that was $55 million statewide. So staff will be eligible for one $2,000 stipend. And if they're still with the agency 6 months later, a second $2,000 stipend. I'm just looking through the chat to see if there are any other questions.
No other questions, but we can take more questions now. I see John has another question here. Has RHA provided any funds for housing for young people?
So kind of how that, yeah, it's a great question. So how the regional authority is working is all of our contracts that were previously at the city level and the county level have rolled over the regional homelessness authority. So at this point, it's just the contracts we'd previously had. So everything that we'd receive from the city, which is a lot of our sort of operations costs, is now being given out by the regional authority. And that'll be continue to be the case, and we'll kind of see how they expand that in future years. We do need volunteers to testify. I would love to get you added to the list. It's always wonderful to have volunteers and community members be there. When will you get ground at the Workforce Development Center? Great question. There's a kind of a lot of factors in play, likely early 2023. Anything else? Anything that I missed? If we have any partners on the line, anything that happened that I didn't mention?
There's a lot of very knowledgeable people here today, so feel free to continue to chat with us. And you don't necessarily have to ask a question. You can also add to it. And I will just, while you're thinking about other questions, I'm going to just quickly share my screen to also highlight some other ways. So I would, if I was going to work on this slide right now, I would add volunteering to testify as Barb suggested with Jesse just now. So that's a wonderful idea. We are always in need of needed items for youth. So we want to give you the chance to participate in helping to provide those needed supplies for young people. And I actually have a link here that I'm just going to share. This is our Amazon wish list right now. It actually happens to be a lot of housewares. So that's a really great thing, because that means young people are getting housed and are starting their first home or moving in with a roommate and need things like can openers and sheets and towels. And so that's something that we're seeing right now and seeing a need for right now. We are about to launch a drive that will be themed on helping youth stay connected and specifically with technology. So helping folks have phone minutes, phone cards, chargers, things like that, because it has become essential to survive and stay in school and get a job and stay in connected with a support network through having a phone or technology. So that will be coming. Again, the save the date here for the luncheon, September 15th at 12 p.m. Put it on your calendar right now if you can. And then you'll have more chance to register later. We'll definitely make sure you get a registration link. One way to help is tell a friend about Youth Care. So if you're not feeling like you want to stand at a microphone with City Council, it's still very impactful to just spread the word about youth homelessness and the need for support in trying to serve young people who are experiencing homelessness. We are always also looking for volunteers to help us provide meals for the programs that we are, that includes shelters, housing, any of our different engagement centers. So this is such a big help when our staff are spending their days dealing with anything that walks through the door that the youth might be bringing with them and need support with. So when one more thing is taken care of for the day, the staff can continue to engage. And one day soon, hopefully we'll continue to have in-person volunteers who can help us cook. We're not quite there yet, but we're hoping sometime soon. And then the other thing you can do is follow us on social media. We really are trying to update some things from Youth Care and about the youth that we're serving and about our community members who are supporting in our social media. So it's a fun way to also continue to get updates. I see Jesse wrote the correct numbers from the previous slide. Should have been that $68 million for rental assistance, $114 million for the Housing Trust Fund, and $240 million, I'm guessing, for the rapid housing acquisitions. And then, yeah, I see Carolyn's question about when to help with lunch. You know, it's going to be one of the first volunteer opportunities that opens up at the Orion Center because the Orion Center is such a large building and has a pretty reasonable airflow. And so we're taking all of that into consideration. We are kind of hanging back a little bit to see what the changes in the recent COVID restrictions will do for our COVID cases. We don't want to get started and then have to rewind again. So we want to make sure that we're feeling good about where we're going with COVID exposure, both for people who might volunteer like yourselves and for the staff and youth who will be in our buildings. And then let's see, Barb's asking what kind of youth care performance data legislators are interested in. And this might be a good chance to talk about the PQI team also, Jesse, but I'll let you answer that question.
Yeah, I guess I can speak to kind of legislator asks that we've had recently with the kind of discussion of behavioral health funding and shelters. We got a number of questions of kind of how that's working at Youth Care, if it's been able to stabilize clients, how it's affected housing outcomes. But I think generally it's a lot of questions about kind of what's working, what's not working. Are young people able to exit into housing? Are young people who exit able to stay in housing? Kind of what barriers are and things like that. But Randy mentioned our performance quality and integration PQI team, who does kind of all our data and research and reporting. So they do kind of everything that relates to contracts and accreditation, and they sort of track all of that sort of data. And I kind of rely heavily on them with legislators. We have gotten a number of questions too, kind of about the workforce capacity issues, kind of turnover and why folks are leaving, and how that compares to sort of other providers locally that we've been able to provide thanks to the PQI team.
Yeah, and I'd say that this is something, the PQI work that has been done at Youth Care is something that I want to continue to just talk about a little bit, because it is a really innovative part of the work where the program quality and integration team is gathering data from our actual program statistics, as well as the information surveys of young people on a quarterly basis and surveys of staff on a quarterly basis. So really, really intentional measurement of how we're doing, what needs to change, and what we can and what we can promise that we're able to do and achieve as an agency serving young people. All right, good questions. Oh, I see someone. Oh, great, you're welcome. Yeah, I'm trying to think if we missed, was something else was on my mind, but is there anything else on anyone's mind that, I know some folks here are new to youth care and some folks have been around for a long time. So we welcome any kind of question. And while you're continuing to think of that, I will also share one more slide where we want to just quickly make sure you have our contact information. And I'll pop that in the chat too. So my email address is randy.esseltine@youthcare.org. And just
quick note that mine is actually jessica.friedman@youthcare.org.
Oh, that's my fault.
I don't know why.
I think I did that.
That's okay. That would follow logic, but
so that's great. And I do want to say, you know, just in the face of COVID and just the bumpiness of the last couple years, you know, I know it feels like we have been closed off to the community a little bit and we haven't had a lot of chance to connect. And one of the reasons we're going to try to continue a series like this, we're going to hopefully do some community conversation lunch and learns like this on a monthly basis. So we should see another kind of save the date coming out soon for one that's coming at the end of April. And that one is, anyway, so we're going to continue to try to stay connected. I want to just also say, though, that even if we've had to be more cautious around who and how many people are coming into our buildings through youth care, we have not once shut our doors to youth. So we've had some shelter in place for the first year basically of COVID, but we are a lot more, we're doing drop-in services, we're doing housing navigation, we're doing all the whole continuum of services for youth to have access to move forward, even when it feels like the rest of the community is a little bit more closed off. And I will also say, I want to add that that's a huge shout out, and also another reason that compensation is so important is that our staff have been showing up fearlessly for the young people that we're serving throughout this whole time as well. And I know that volunteers are such a valuable part of supporting the services. So we miss you for sure. Please don't doubt that we miss the volunteers. I was just looking at volunteer data from 2019 to now, and yeah, it makes me feel very sad that we haven't had as many of you involved. So we were eager to get you back as well. Yeah, so the question about the PQI team, the program quality and integration team is measuring data by program and by youth care as a whole. So we can kind of give the big picture of all of youth care, and also they're leveraging the data to do just different performance plans with each individual program to ensure that we are doing the best services that we can possibly do for young people. And there's a question here about what percentage of our youth are refugees. That's a great question. I don't know the number off the top of my head. Jesse, do you know what that number might be? Yeah. So I can ask that question, Carolyn, and I'll follow up with you because I know I have your contact information. So we do serve, I'll do a little bit about the demographics that we serve since the question is there. I'll tell you what I do know, whether you ask for it or not. We serve, youth who are ages 12 to 24. And within that group of youth, we are serving about 1,500 young people a year. That's unduplicated. So if someone comes to lunch every single day, that's they're still counted as one person. So we're serving about 1,500 young people in a year. Within that 1,500 that we know of, about 30% of the youth we serve are identifying as LGBTQIA, which is very stark compared to the 3 to 5% of the nation that identifies as such. So we see some disproportionality there. Even in Seattle, I know people are sort of surprised that even in Seattle, we still see such a horrifying number of LGBT youth who are experiencing homelessness. And then also we serve about 70, just over 70% youth of color in our services. So we don't necessarily measure, I don't know if we for sure measure refugee status, but we do measure demographics. And we know that we have just over 70% youth of color, which is also stark compared to a city or county that is, I think I was just looking it up this morning. I think I saw that King County is 62% white. And so that is also, again, a disproportionality that we can all acknowledge. We do have a program specifically for refugee young people, and that's a program that can sleep about 20 young people every night, and that's 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365. So I can for sure say on any given day we have 20 beds for refugees, but that doesn't mean that we don't serve refugees in all of our other services as well. And I will say, anecdotally, I've been at Youth Care for a long time, and anecdotally I've heard, just based on volunteer requests and item requests that we get, it does seem like there's a high number of refugee young people because we're commonly navigating language barriers, and which is specifically challenging for young people who are trying to navigate all kinds of services which might impact their housing and their food and their childcare or whatever they're trying to navigate. If they have language barriers, it's that extra piece. Do we need transitional housing for youth via Airbnb? That's a wonderful question. And maybe Jesse, you also have some thoughts about this, but we actually have more been interested in Airbnb for staff, which is like, I know that's a funny thing to say. There's a program at the YMCA Seattle that is called Host Homes, and they are more likely a program that would partner with an organization like Airbnb or with hosts that have Airbnb rentals. That is I would encourage you to go check out the program called Host Homes at the YMCA. They have a model that would fit better with Airbnb. When I say we have looked into Airbnb for staff in the past couple of years, that has been really based on weather needs. So when we have inclement weather and our staff are living far away, like, Tacoma, Puyallup, we have staff in Everett, and so when, oh yeah, thanks, Jesse. So when we have inclement weather, we've looked for temporary solutions for our staff so that they can still show up to our programs that stay open during inclement weather, and they don't have to travel 2 hours on an icy highway to get to and from work. The other piece that has also been interesting, and this is an anecdote from just my experiences, when there were protests during the election time, we were wanting to secure some housing options for staff so that they could stay close to their workplace and not have to travel, especially as a person of color in Seattle during a time that was sort of scary for them as a person. So we were trying to find some little temporary solutions at that moment as well. Those are just like little anecdotal stories, but Airbnb is a wonderful resource. Yes, I see that Randy's going to help us with the Amazon wish list. Great. We do have an updated info sheet. Probably actually the website is a good resource to look at. Just in this moment, it would take me a minute to pull something up. But Randy, I can follow up with you to send you an info sheet as well. Thank you for doing that. Okay, anything else? There's some, yeah, thanks for being so engaged. Thank you for being here. I know there were some folks who came to our last Lunch and Learn, so thanks for coming both times. And thanks for those who are new this time. I know I want to, yeah, I'm just so excited to see some of your names here. I can follow up about the CEO question because it sounds like you're not getting what you need, Keen, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, but I can follow up with you about what specific questions you have about the CEO. Okay.
Well, thank you, everyone. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have any other questions, and appreciate you being here today and being interested in the process.
Yes, thank you. And never hesitate to reach out any other time. And we'll see you in April, hopefully.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.